to be successful in corporate life, you should be able to manage up and manage down. And a
Right.
lot of young devs, I feel they get confused, like what is the meaning of managing up and managing down? So if
Yeah.
you can give some tips, what do you mean
Yeah,
by
sure.
managing up and managing down?
Yeah, sure. I think this is a really good question, right? I mean, it's and during my career, I mean, like, I've been around the industry for a long time. I've struggled with this as well. It's not like, you kind of like know how to do these things, and you kind of like
Sure.
learn over a period of time. And I've actually found that sometimes it's actually, you've got to manage expectations in three ways, right? One is like how you manage expectations up to your bosses and so on. Like, what is the stuff that they need, and how do you actually manage it?
Right.
To your own peers, right? Like, look, you're committing something to them, and how do you do this? And it's another thing. And of course, to all the people who report into you, like, how do you kind of like keep them happy and all that kind of stuff. And it's sometimes very difficult to do all three really well. Some people are more comfortable with managing expectations up. Just like,
Mhm.
your bosses basically say, look, this is what is, they're really good at saying, they'll send an email and say, look, this is what it is. And then they'll say, look, this is what's happening, and so on and so forth. They'll keep them updated with everything else. And they're really happy with the progress and everything else, right? But they don't actually talk to the people who are reporting to them. And they're kind of like kept in the dark and like, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. Like, I get this information really late. And some and the same, or the other way around, right? So you're really good at managing the team and everything else. You're doing such a good job about it, but you don't actually mention the successes of the team to
Mm.
your managers, and to your peers and so on, right? And you say you almost think, oh, this is what is expected of the team. This is what we do, and so that's perfectly fine. I don't have to tell these people, and so they actually don't know what you're doing.
Mm.
So I think the first thing is, which I've learned over the years, is to actually celebrate success, right, within the team itself.
Right.
So you need to, any success that you have, no matter how small they are, you gotta kind of like do it publicly, right? Criticism is generally dealt with in private, but yeah, successes should be celebrated, and you talk about it a lot, and that needs to kind of like circulate up, down, sideways, all that kind of stuff. Number one.
True.
The second thing is for you to identify who are the key people that you need uh, to communicate, right? So drawing a stakeholder map really helps. Like for a lot of people, you need to say like, how do I need to get them involved with it? Do I need to keep them updated?
Mm.
Right? Like just informed and
True.
people develop things like races and so on and so forth. And in a way, all those things are kind of like meant to help you with how you communicate or how you involve them, and so on and so forth. So my tip is, if there's one simple thing I'll say is like, try and create your own RACI, right? Or diagram that actually talks about who are the people you need to inform, who are the people you need to get involved, and all
True.
those kind of things. Kind of like prepare a list, and also kind of like have some kind of an operating rhythm in like how frequently you need to kind of like communicate with them,
Right.
right? Whether it's through a meeting, whether it's through an email, and everybody's got their own operating styles.
Right.
So if you can actually manage that well, I think that's really good. And if you move on to um, if you move on to like a I suppose like to a leadership role of something in your company, like when you have people reporting into you and you have a lot of colleagues that you need to work with and upwards and so on, the operating rhythm is really important. When I talk about operating rhythm, it's about who are the people that how do you actually communicate with them and how often you do it. So if you got a whole bunch of if you need to run one-on-ones with your immediate people who immediately report into you, well, what's the cadence of it? Do you do it once a week? Is it twice a week? I mean, there's no rule that says that's how it's got to be, right? It's up to
True.
you and the team to actually set that. How often do you need team meetings? So you have one-on-ones, but you've got like you're managing a team of 5, right? Do you do it once a week? Is it twice a week, right? And
Yep.
what is it that you want to discuss in these meetings,
True.
right? That's
True.
going to be really important. And then if you're looking after a larger team, right? So when do you involve all of them? It's almost like a town hall and things like that. Like how often do you do it? Do you do it once a month, right?
Right.
You do it twice a month. There's no, again, like I said, there's no real right formula for it, right? Some people do it once a quarter. So they call the whole team, right? All your managers, all the managers who report into you, and then all the people who report into them, bring them in big room, or these days, you can actually do it through Teams or whatever it is, Zoom or whatever it is.
Right.
And you got to decide what you're going to tell, what you're going to communicate to the team.
Right.
Sometimes the trap that we fall into is that we get fed a lot of information because we are probably in leadership meetings and other team meetings and things like that, and we hear a lot of things, and we basically naturally assume that everybody knows those things, and actually they don't, because they're too
Mm.
focused on day-to-day work. If you're cutting code, hey, look, like, I'm developing APIs, that's the only thing that I know about, right?
Right.
And so you need to kind of like start mm, uh, to pass on the message that your own bosses have actually given to you down to your team, because that's what your role is, like, to basically to communicate all those kind of things. Like I said, you got to celebrate successes and so on, right? I mean, this is the thing about having not just success. You can actually celebrate things like birthdays and
Yeah.
you've been in the company for 10 years. Calling that out in some of these town
Mm.
halls and so on is actually a good thing. It kind of like keeps a lot of people happy that they're being acknowledged for those
Sure.
things. Again, talking about operating rhythm and cadence. How often do you need to set up a meeting with your own peers, right? Let's say you're a CTO, and then you have like a CFO, or other GMs from the business and everything else. Do you
Mm.
meet up with them frequently and tell them what your team is doing and find out what their needs are, how your team can actually help them, and all those kind of things? That is really crucial, I think, in terms of
Mm.
managing their expectations. Basically, your question is like, look, what is your expectation from me and my team? Are they being met? What else can I do? If they're not being met, is there something I can do?
Right.
What is happening in your team that's going to be useful for my team that I can actually pass on? That little piece of information is going to be quite useful in having that relationship with your peers.
Right.
And of course, there's all there's all this project statuses and so on and so forth that you kind of like need to make sure you pass it on to your bosses so that they are happy with it. Um, Good news should be shared as soon as they become available. Bad
Mm.
news should be passed on even earlier than that.
Yes. That's
So if
important.
something is going bad, right, it's better to actually keep them informed. And look, something is not going well in this thing. So, I think I have it under control, or it may actually spiral out of control, but I'm just giving you a really early heads up.
Right. And
And
sometimes you get help also.
that's right. So you can
Yeah.
actually shout out for help. And that's a really important point that you actually made, right?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, we talk about stakeholder management and so on and so forth. Calling out for help is really important,
Yes.
and sometimes our own egos don't permit it. It's like, oh, I'm not going to ask for help, and I can manage.
Yeah.
I've done this in the past. We can actually do it, and so on and so forth. And I think we kind of like need to recognize the fact that you can't do everything on your own. So you kind of like need to leverage on support, and you'll find that people are all looking. Most people in companies will kind of like they're all looking towards the success of the company and success of the product and things like that. They'll be more than happy to pitch in, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like need to trust people, and then tap into them for help and so on. And so shouting out for help is a really
Mhm.
really important thing. Yeah.
True, true. No, very good point. I think it is very important to understand what it mean by
Mm.
managing up, and what it mean by managing down to be
Yeah.
successful manager.